So what if I told you that one person, with just one instrument, managed to change the entire sound of music, not once, but 5 different times? Well, today we're going to unpack the story of that person, the one and only, the legendary Miles Davis.
It sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? I mean, how does one musician stay that far ahead of the curve, constantly reinventing the game? To figure that out, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning.
All right, let's start with Chapter 1, The Prodigy. This is where we see how a young Miles Davis went from picking up his very first trumpet to playing his first professional gigs.
So, Miles Davis was born back in 1926 in Illinois. He got his first trumpet when he was 9, and it turns out he was a total natural. I mean, seriously, think about what you were doing at 13. Miles was already a professional musician, out there playing actual gigs. By the time he was 18, he packed his bags for the biggest stage in the world, New York City.
Now, the official story he told his parents was that he was heading to New York to study classical music at the famous Juilliard School. But, his real classroom was going to be in the smoky jazz clubs of 52nd Street. He was on a mission to find his heroes, guys like the incredible saxophonist Charlie Parker.
And this is where the story really starts to get interesting. Welcome to Chapter 2, The Rebel. Because Miles figured something out pretty early on. First, you have to learn all the rules, and then you have to break every single one of them.
At that time, the sound of New York City was a style of jazz called bebop. The best way to describe it? Imagine a video game set to the hardest difficulty. It was unbelievably fast, super complex, and it was all about these high-energy solos that showed off your technical skill.
You can really see the 2 different worlds Miles was living in. On one side, you've got Juilliard, all about structure, textbooks, and formal lessons. And on the other side, the 52nd Street clubs, spontaneous, raw, and totally real. He had to make a choice. Was it going to be textbooks or the stage? Well, he chose the stage. He actually dropped out of Juilliard to play music full-time. But while he was playing that super-fast bebop style, Miles had this amazing breakthrough. He realized he couldn't outplay everyone with sheer speed, so he just decided not to try. While everyone else was basically shouting with their instruments, he started to whisper. He focused on melody, on emotion, and in a sea of noise, his sound was just unforgettable.
But see, just playing in other people's bands was never going to be enough for him. It was time for his first huge reinvention. This is the moment Miles becomes the innovator and creates a sound that would define a whole new era, the birth of cool.
He literally looked at what everyone else was doing with bebop and did the exact opposite. If bebop was this fiery, aggressive, hot red, his new cool jazz was a calm, relaxed blue. It was melodic, it was soft, and he even used a larger band with instruments you didn't normally hear in jazz, like the French horn and the tuba. It was a total game changer.
So, why was this such a massive deal? Well, Birth of the Cool proved that jazz could be just as carefully arranged and sophisticated as classical music. It showed that one leader, one person with a vision, could invent a whole new genre. And the most incredible part of all this? Miles Davis did it all while he was still just in his early 20s. The guy was already a legend in the making. But believe me, he was just getting started. The 1950s would see him change the game all over again, thanks to his legendary bands, a very special piece of equipment, and what many people say is one of the greatest albums ever made.
You ever heard a trumpet that sounds less like a big brassy fanfare and more like a secret being whispered right in your ear? Well, that's the sound of the Harmon mute. Miles started placing this little metal device in the bell of his trumpet, and it created this fragile, whisper-like, and intensely personal sound. It wasn't just a tool, it became his voice.
This quote just captures it perfectly. A lonely whisper that could fill a room. By playing really close to the microphone with this mute, he could express these huge emotions without ever having to play loud. And that signature sound? It's all over his 1959 masterpiece, an album called Kind of Blue. Now, this isn't just a famous jazz album. It is the best-selling jazz album of all time, selling over 5 million copies in the US alone. It's that one album that even people who say they don't like jazz end up absolutely loving.
So what was the secret ingredient? A whole new style he pioneered called modal jazz. Think of it this way. Most music is like driving through a city. You're constantly making turns and hitting stop signs. Those are all the different chords. Modal jazz was like getting on a wide-open highway. The musicians could just cruise on one single scale for a long time, which gave the music this incredible feeling of space and freedom and calm. It was completely revolutionary.
Okay, so by now he's invented cool jazz and modal jazz and created the best-selling jazz album ever. Most artists would just call that a career and stick with what works, right? Not Miles.
By the late 60s, the world was changing, and so was he. It was time to plug in. He created another brand new genre called jazz fusion, and it's pretty much what it sounds like, a fusion of two very different styles. It took the complex improvisation from jazz and mashed it together with the electric power, the loud volume, and the instruments of rock music, like electric guitars and synthesizers.
Now this was a very risky move. His old fans were furious. They literally called him a sellout. But Miles Davis did not care about critics or about looking back. He wanted to connect with the new generation that was listening to rock and funk. For him, the only direction to move was forward.
This constant change, this absolute refusal to stand still, is what makes him the legend. I mean, even his retirement from music and his eventual return just became another chapter in his incredible story.
So check this out. In 1975, at the peak of his fame, Miles just disappeared. He completely stopped playing music, he said because of health issues, and he picked up painting instead. The world thought he was done for good. But then, in 1981, he came roaring back, reinventing himself one last time with a modern 80s sound, embracing pop and funk for a whole new audience.
So when you look back, what is his legacy? It's honestly almost impossible to measure. The man changed the direction of music over and over again. He discovered and launched the careers of dozens of other music legends. He became this global icon of style, confidence, and, well, cool. Most importantly, he proved that the greatest artists are the ones who never, ever stop evolving. He's even in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
And I think the ultimate lesson from the life of Miles Davis is really simple. You can never stand still. He showed all of us that to be truly great at what you do, you have to keep moving, keep searching, and always be hungry for whatever is next.
Miles spent his entire life chasing the future of sound. Which kind of leaves us with one last question to think about. What's next? What do you think will be the sound that changes everything for your generation?